All right, good morning. Good morning to you all. I'm Mary Leslie, I'm president of the Los Angeles Business Council. Thank you. Thank you very much. And on behalf of our founding chair, Richard Ziman, our LABC chair, Nadine Watt, and our LABC Institute chair, Brad Cox, welcome to the LABC Supervisorial Candidate Forum. This is the second forum in a three-part series. The series began in December of last year with the candidates for LA City Council District 5 and the LA City Attorney's race. And this February 28th, we will host an LA Mayoral Candidate Forum here at the Waldorf, so please join us. Today, we are honored to have the leading candidates with us for LA County Supervisor. Joining us are veteran policymakers, State Senator Bob Hertzberg, State Senator Henry Stern, and West Hollywood Council Member Lindsay Horvath. Let's give them a round of applause. We'd like to thank our host, The Oasis, for having us here at the beautiful Waldorf Astoria, and we want to thank our sponsors for the candidate series, UCLA and King Spalding, for their generous support. The LABC is proud to host today's forum. We believe LA County and our region are at an inflection point. The last 2 years have been particularly and disproportionately businesses have been affected, particularly those in the retail, tourism, and hospitality sector. The new LA County Supervisor will be dealing with many important issues, ranging from clean energy to tourism to international trade, a lack of affordable housing and homelessness, and of course, our response to COVID. Economic and environmental inequality and corruption in our public sector. Our audience will get a chance to hear each candidate and ask questions. Many of our moderators' questions today are based on the LABC Institute and the LA Times survey, a homeless survey that we conducted in December. If you'd like to learn more about the survey response, please take a look at our website at labusinesscouncil.org. We are also excited to announce our media partnership for today's event and the remainder of the event, Spectrum News 1. Spectrum will be recording and airing the forum in the coming weeks, beginning February 25th at 8 p.m. They will continue to air for 3 days consecutively. So if your friends and family would like to view today's event, please watch it on Spectrum 1 starting February 25th. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator from the Spectrum News team, Alex Cohen. Alex is the host of the nightly public affairs program Inside the Issues on Spectrum News 1 and the Spectrum weekly podcast, SoCal in 17. Prior to Spectrum, Alex spent nearly two decades in public radio working with NPR and member station KPCC. In addition to her love of news, Alex is a big fan of roller derby, having played with the LA Derby dolls under the nom de jure Axles of Evil. She is also the author of the book, Down in Derby, The Insider's Guide to Roller Derby. Please join me in welcoming today's moderator, Alex Cohen.
My thanks to Mary and LABC, to all three candidates for being here with us today, and of course, thank you to all of you for showing up this morning. My previous career in roller derby should have absolutely no bearing on most of today's event, with two exceptions. We are going to have some time restrictions for answers so that we can cover a lot of ground. We have a wonderful assistant here, so I'm going to ask my candidates to be mindful of the time codes here so I don't have to raise any elbows to cut you off. Likewise, we are all in a very complicated situation right now when it comes to COVID-19 and masking rules. We have checked, just as of this morning, to confirm that even though we are here in Los Angeles County, due to the fact that this is a private gathering and that vaccination status has been required for everyone who is in attendance today, we are allowed to take our masks off. We leave that up to you and your decisions, but the same is true for our candidates, and we want to just be very respectful of the fact they are all appearing here in public. We love photos and whatnot, but let's be mindful of the fact that if they choose to require their masks, and it's a big help to us in trying to make good television, they are doing so in accordance with the law. So, all of that said, let's head into the really, truly interesting stuff. In my conversations with the LABC, we wanted to start off at a point that would really maybe kind of get politicians, sometimes you all are campaigning, you want to make your case for why you're the best candidate. But we really want to focus first on the district. And of course, this is a district, like so many districts here in California, that has changed due to the once-a-decade process of redistricting. So when we're talking about this district, as it now looks, I would like each of you to come up with a couple of adjectives. What are the words you would use to describe the distinct personality of this district? And maybe you could share with us why it is so personally important to you. Why do you want to be its representative? Here's going to be our format for the day. We're going to do a little round robin. Each of our candidates for this particular question will have 3 minutes each. From here on out, it'll be 2 minutes. We're going to start off with Bob Hertzberg, and we'll move down the line. So let's start with you. A couple of words to describe District 3, Bob.
Thanks very much, Alex. You know, the redistricting process has been fabulous in the sense that at least it's not political. One of the biggest issues for me that's been problematic, and I worked on the redistricting commission at the state, is to move politicians out of the process. People will argue about it, but you know, the idea, one of the biggest criticisms of politicians is self-dealing, and you've got to move away from that. Were there challenges with this process? Yes. No question about it. Now, the new district, quite frankly, from a deeply political perspective, was Democrat plus 40 in the old district. It's Democrat plus 38. So there's been discussion about it changing substantially politically. That's not true. It's just 2% difference. The difference, I think, is that it's Valley-centric. 75% of the folks in here are from the Valley. That represents the Valley. The Valley would be the 7th largest city ever in the United States of America, and it's never had somebody who's a representative on the board in many, many years. And so the fact that it has a community of the San Fernando Valley, does it include Beverly Hills, does it include Bel Air and other areas that are part of it in Santa Monica? Yes. But it's important for a community that's always been felt like they have never gotten their fair share to actually have a strong voice. So it hasn't changed that much. There's been some areas in Granada Hills and Chatsworth that have come in. There's been a few other areas that have created some criticism. And for me, the passion is, and what was a substantial motivation to run for this office, was the fact that it's a Valley seat. It's so important. And I have spent a career of dozens of years fighting for the Valley, bringing the Orange Line to the San Fernando Valley, bringing the Valley Performing Arts Center to the San Fernando Valley, bringing 38 new schools to the San Fernando Valley. And the argument I get sometimes, which is a fair question, is, well, what about everybody else? What about the other parts of the community that aren't the Valley? What are the ones that aren't 818? Look, I'm somebody who fights for people that I represent. My entire career from 30 years ago has been for the San Fernando Valley. If I was representing Fresno, I'd be saying the same thing, because that's what I do. I work hard, I deliver resources, I offer voice, I show up at every neighborhood council, even though I'm a state representative, and go to the city, because you've got to listen deeply, understand your folks, be responsive, and be available. And I just think that this is such an opportunity for the San Fernando Valley. It excites me, and it was a huge motivation for me to decide to jump in this race. I was planning for my next retirement and what I'm doing, but as a citizen, someone who cares deeply and has worked so hard with so much experience, I felt that given the emergency time that we're in now, the great challenges, the inflection point that Mary said, it's time for someone with deep proven experience and a proven track record to deal with these extraordinary challenges.
Thank you very much. Lindsay Horvath.
Thank you very much. And I would agree, it is about having someone with a proven track record, and that's actually why I got into this race. The sense of urgency of this moment that people feel around issues of homelessness, of community safety, building out our regional transportation network, and getting our businesses back up and running with people in good jobs to afford themselves and their families a good quality of life is what everybody's talking about. I'm concerned about some of the solutions that have been offered and how they've been positioned as a zero-sum game. when I think about this district, it is creative, it is diverse, and it is innovative. And we have to tap into all of that in order to solve these problems that face us in this moment. When we think about the challenge of homelessness, I'm the only candidate who's actually got a plan that not only identifies how we solve it, but I've put it into action. You can see how this plan works in my own community. And we've delivered results, 80% effectiveness year after year, and it would be even higher if we had the rest of the region doing what we're doing. And so I know we'll get into that a little bit later. Thinking about community safety, how do we bring people together and truly keep people safe? In this time where people have a lot of questions around that and whether they're getting their fair share of resources to keep their communities safe, we have lowered our crime rate in my community by 20% from 5 years ago. We're one of the only communities that's able to talk about that and have that as our reality right now. And I think that's what everybody's looking for. How do we keep people safe in this very difficult time? We also are looking at how we need to build out our regional transportation network and touch all parts of the district. And I think that's very important. This district is diverse. Goes from Hollywood, West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Venice, and Palms. Yes, including Malibu and Westlake Village and Hidden Hills and Granada Hills and Pacoima and Sylmar and Olive View and everywhere in between, Sherman Oaks and Tarzana. It is a diverse district with a lot of different points of view on how we're going to solve problems. That's why we need somebody who's practical, who's going to bring people together and has a proven track record of doing that, of building a diverse coalition to solve problems. And we need to make sure that we're doing this with our businesses in mind. We need businesses to be up and running, to provide good jobs to people, to keep our economy going, to make sure that people who came to Los Angeles or who were born here to realize the dreams that they had for themselves here in this city, that they were able to realize them, and that people are able to work a good job, not many jobs, but a good job so they can provide for their families, take care of themselves. That's really important. And people are struggling right now. They're wondering how they're going to make ends meet. They're wondering how we're going to be led out of this time of crisis. I have done that for my community, and I look forward to doing that as a county supervisor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Henry Ster?
Thank you, Alex. And thanks for your bravery, by the way, on not just on TV, but on the internet. And, we take a lot of slings and arrows on Twitter ourselves, but it's a really tough time to speak some truth out there. So I appreciate your journalistic integrity, and it's an honor to be with LABC today. To me, this is the most dynamic business organization in Los Angeles, spinning out big-time ideas, not being afraid of the tough stuff, centering on equity, and acknowledging some of the challenges we have. You asked for, I think, 3 adjectives. So I'll give you one positive and two not so positive. So I'd say dynamic. I think this district represents over 2 million of the most dynamic people in the entire world. And I'm not just talking about the creative engineers and the star power and the folks who make the manufacturing industry or the entertainment industry or our infrastructure go, but the people hustling and trying to make ends meet in a time where incomes and wages aren't really keeping up with cost of housing in LA. And yet somehow people do it and they grind through it. But I would say this district is also disconnected, and I think it's a bit distrustful. I think LA in general feels that way. You look at getting from the valley, like I had to do today, to the west side. You want to talk about disconnected, right? It's that great beyond. It's that 405. And if that freeway is our great disconnect in that pass, and yet our economies are completely intertwined, our work patterns are completely intertwined, and yet we're not. We're not on track. And we have to change that. And that disconnection, COVID exacerbated that and made people feel really isolated. They were isolated. We've been isolated. I can't even believe I'm sitting in a room with y'all. This is amazing. We know telecommuting is going to increase. We know there's still going to be remote school and all those factors. But that disconnection is something we have to rage against in this town. We can't let ourselves sort of live behind each of our own private little walls and try to isolate ourselves in LA. So I think that connectivity is what's going to bring us together in LA, and there's a lot we have to do to make that happen. And last thing on distrust, there's a lot of plans out there. People throw out a lot of metrics and big numbers, especially candidates around this time. How many houses you're going to build or what you're going to do. I'm kind of sick of over-promising. And I'm reticent to throw out any high-minded plans to voters in LA when we keep coming back to them year after year. When they pick up the phone and someone's having, say, a psychotic break right on their lawn in front of their house, and they pick up the phone and call the county to say, I need help. And they're not calling the sheriff's department, they want to call, somebody else. There's no one there to answer right now. And that starts to foment a distrust that I think is making this city very skeptical of itself, and I think it's eroding our culture. And the simple promise is someone just needs to be there to pick up the call and show up. We can't keep leaning on this. So those would be my three.
Thank you for that. And on that note of us all being here in person, one more housekeeping note. You should all see there on your tables, there are index cards and pens. For the most part, I'm going to be asking the question, but we are going to have an audience question time at the end of today. So please, you've got some time, no rush. But if there's specific questions you would like to see our candidates address, we highly encourage you to write them down. We will be collecting them and asking them towards the end of our event. So we're going to hone in a little bit right now on the issue of the day, the issue for our region, which is, of course, homelessness. The LA Business Council conducted a poll Mary mentioned in conjunction with UCLA and the LA Times. And just a couple of numbers that are important here that I'm going to throw out. 94% of voters view homelessness as a serious or very serious problem. 37% of respondents reported feeling moderately to very unsafe. And more than 40% of voters feel the solutions are present, but that we lack political and civic leadership. So on that note, we are going to drill down a bit on specific policies in a moment. But in general, can you give us a sense, and Lindsay Horvath, we'll start with you and move down the line. Tell us how from day one you will provide strong leadership on this particular issue.
I'll provide strong leadership by doing what I've done in my own community. We need to invest in the resources that deliver services directly to people and meet them where they are. We cannot ask our most challenged residents in LA County to navigate sometimes 3 and 4 different departments in LA County to get something done. We can barely do that ourselves. We need to bring those resources and support to people where they are. We need to hire people to do that. We need to work with our community partners to do that. And we need to help provide the services, whether it's transportation, mental health support, addiction recovery services. We need to provide those services to the people who need it most. And I have a proven track record of working with our community partners who contract with the county for service, working with our LA County Sheriff's Department. Obviously, we know the relationship there, but working together and bringing people together to deliver those services and bring about results for our communities. That's what we need to do. And we need to make sure that we're doing it in conjunction with the city of Los Angeles and all of the cities that are in this district. That's part of the divide as well, and I've seen it as a local official where there is a disconnect between what the county says it offers and what people are actually receiving on the ground. I'm able to bridge that gap, and I know how to do it.
Thank you. Henry Stern.
Yeah. I guess day one or maybe the first hour, I don't like to jinx myself and think ahead too much, but I would pick up the phone and call whoever the mayor is. I don't know who it's going to be, but I'd pick up the phone and call them. And to the disconnection point, just make a pledge to lay down our age-old turf battles and the kind of micromanagement that happens between the County Board of Supervisors and City Council, where every little district has sort of its own kingdom. That has to end. This kind of attitude that I'm going to handle the politics or handle the resources in my backyard, and then I'm going to cut the ribbon and be on TV when I do it. We're never going to solve homelessness with the current governance structure we've got. And that's not just about sort of big legal reforms and trust funds. We can get into some of the structural change, but it's also just about the one-upsmanship and the politics of democracy, where you want to be first and you want to be the person in front when a good thing is happening, and you don't want to be there when something bad's happening. So when Bob Blumenfeld, my council member's out there opening up, new permanent supportive housing on Ventura across from, an old derelict commercial building, and he's got to take all the hits, and yet the county supervisor's not there to back him up, that's not going to work. We have to do the hard stuff at county and show our faces and move our communities through this crisis in homelessness. And so, picking up the phone, calling the mayor, calling every single city council member and my own board of supervisors, right, my colleagues, and sort of saying, we're not going to look at this as 5 kingdoms or 5 queendoms, right? We have to be one team in LA. And if we can't figure out how to be a team, the voters are going to change things up for us. I think they've had it. So that's what I say.
Senator Pittsburgh.
The governor said the other day, and I think he's right, I'm not the mayor of California, I'm the governor of California. And the reason he said that is because we do have a structural problem, because the state, the way it's organized, is the state has control of a lot of the money, Fed has a big piece. In addition, the state, all of the counties, all 58 counties are subdivisions of the state. So all of these laws that are written come from the state. And as Henry was saying, you've got this disconnect in terms of the management issue. So the only way you're going to fix this, and we did this, I helped get this through on a supermajority to change the CEQA laws for low-income housing from a pilot project, is to do a bottom-up instead of a top-down approach. When we talk about homelessness at the state level, what happens is people in Fresno say, oh, that doesn't work for us, or Imperial County says, that doesn't work for us. Let's start with a pilot project that's just LA County. Let's go in with urgency legislation. Let's bring the Board of Supervisors together with the cities and all the various interest groups and pull them together on an urgent basis, literally around the clock, so we can get something done. As was suggested, people are losing confidence in us. Let's go to Sacramento together with the 31 members of the LA delegation, of which I'm co-chair, and I'm former speaker and majority leader, and I know how to get votes and make this stuff happen and organize. And let's do a pilot project. Let's take responsibility. The point that was made about pointing fingers, that's exactly correct. We have to take responsibility. The county and the cities have to come up with a plan where they're taking responsibility, where it's their idea. Every time, whether I was involved with so many of these issues at local government and the like, it's this tension between the state and the local. This has to germinate from us, together with the 31 members of the local delegation, on urgency legislation. Here's the 22 laws we need changed, including issues on a whole host of things, mental health, public safety, public health, and the like. Here's a pilot project, and here's responsibility. Throw me out of office if I don't make it happen. I will take on the burden instead of right now, all the different governments pointing fingers at each other.
We've heard allusions here to some of the conflicts that arise geographically. There are also some differences in opinion when it comes to what the time span should be regarding all of this. The LABC Institute's homelessness survey showed 57 of respondents believe that officials should focus on the immediate short-term solutions. Meanwhile, 30% support longer-term solutions. Beginning this time with Senator Stern, how much of your plan would focus on long-term versus short-term solutions?
I think we've been given a false choice between the two. I think we can do both. So I know that's not directly responsive, but I think it is both. I think it's about emergency level speed, like the same speed that we work with FEMA when a disaster rolls through town and we get housing up for people who lose it fast. I think we can do that. And, talking about trying to get under $100,000 a unit, some of the tiny homes and some of the shelter work we've been doing, but at the same time, a robust, affordable housing trust that's up for the task of permanent supportive housing for everybody who needs it. I honestly think we need a guarantee on that. I think it's not just right to shelter. I think it needs to be a right to mental health services and the supportive services, including housing, that go along with it. So we're going to have to focus on permanent supportive housing and affordable housing. But we can't stall out all the services and sit on that money until we have it. Right now, county has been holding back a lot of the services dollars, a lot of that wraparound, because they're saying it doesn't come until there's permanent supportive housing there to sort of house it. But that doesn't work, because again, when you pick up the phone and someone's literally dying on your street, there's no one there. There's 3 mobile psychiatric units for the entire county of LA. 3. About 30 people working there. You're talking about that, those are the psychiatric social workers. That's the whole team. How are we going to tackle this with 30 people? So it's pushing the short term. It's having abundant, relentless, compassionate service, and then saying yes and finding a way to yes and streamlining that permanent supportive housing work that there's no way around it. We need those units. But I just think people, if you make people wait for that and you say that's the only thing that's going to work, we won't have the public trust anymore.
Senator Hertzberg.
When you look at the folks that are homeless, they fall into a couple of different tranches, and they should be treated based upon their tranche. First, there's people that are just down on their luck. There are people that are actually working on jobs. At Kroger's, I read a report recently that 1 in 7 people there are actually homeless and working in jobs. So those folks, you don't have to worry about the mental health services and some of the other things to provide what's necessary. Ken Kraft at Hope of the Valley is building units at $22,000 a copy, not these big, gigantic numbers that are killing us. And I'm going to put a huge budget request in for a community kitchen for them and try to help that happen. Paul Kokorian, as Bob Blumenfeld, has done just a fantastic job, but it's a small piece of it. So with respect to those folks, the idea of other services aren't as necessary. It's just get them off the street. People are frustrated. This anger and angst is honest and real in terms of sending a message of what's happening to our society. It's painful to walk down the street. It's painful to see this in different parts of the community. With respect to mental health issues and often the dual diagnosis with drug issues, you know, Carrie Morrison, who I'm working with, has this concept that came out of Italy actually called the whole person. And it's the idea of treating the whole person as an individual. It's been highly successful. I'm talking a lot to her, and she's been really, really intelligent about it. The idea is, you know, moving quickly is very difficult because of all the bureaucracies and stuff. We all have these great intentions to do this and to do that. Go build a building, go get a permit, see what that looks like with all your great intentions despite everything. So the idea is the speed is critical because we've got to show some action to folks that we're actually doing something to build people's confidence. If you just simply have more meetings and the like, it doesn't work. No, we're just politicians. Who cares? We're noisemakers. Get it done. Take action. Prove the point. And so I would focus on them first. I would focus on the whole person in terms of, and part of this whole person activity would be getting the urgency legislation on 2/3 votes in both houses necessary to actually change these critical laws and make that happen.
Thank you. Councilmember Horvath.
Thank you. I think the real question that people are asking is not whether short-term or long-term, but how are you going to get it done? Because people believe that, as you said, the solutions exist, but it's really about political will and the understanding on the ground of how to implement those solutions. Short-term, we need to have street teams who go out and actually meet people where they are and connect with people so they understand what services exist and how to access them. It's as simple as that. There are many times where people just have no idea where to start. They don't even know how to do some of the basic things that we take for granted. We have to help them. We have to meet them where they are. They're not just going to magically understand that because there was a budget line item or somebody made a declaration from Sacramento that now their problems are going to be fixed. We need to help them understand what is available. And we need to also act swiftly with a sense of urgency and treat this, as was said, as a local emergency. When I came into office in 2015, I saw that we were asking our sheriff's department to respond to these issues, but often they were not trained in issues of mental health or drug addiction in the ways that clinically trained social workers were. And I learned that there were 2 mental evaluation teams in the county for the entire county. 2 teams. So if you were calling for help with a mental health issue or an addiction issue, it could take hours for somebody to show up. So I added in our budget a line item to have 2 dedicated to our community. Now, it took us 2 years, thanks to the county bureaucracy and the privilege of being able to pay them for those services, but we made it happen. And I learned how to cut through that bureaucracy to get results for my community and to get things done. That's the kind of stuff we need to do in the short term. Long term, we do need to look at our housing policies, adopting inclusionary housing. So when we're building, we're including housing that makes sense and is available for everyone and is accessible to everyone. And there are some other longer term, but I see we're out of time.
We're going to move now and pivot to the structure that is in place in terms of how we respond to our unhoused residents. The current structure basically came about the year that I graduated from college. And much as I would love to believe that that was very short time ago, it's not. And a lot of folks are wondering, is this whole structure in need of upheaval? And there's a number of different ideas that have been floated about: smaller regional coordinating entities, some sort of metro-style agency, a LASA reform and realignment plan, a new joint powers authority structure. We're going to begin this time with Senator Hertzberg. Your thoughts on the structure of all of this here in LA County and what needs to happen?
Well, I think consistent with what I said before is collaboration. What's the big problem in government is we come in, as was suggested, these big ideas and we try to impose them on people. The idea, if this is going to work, it has to be come up from ground up. And so I would suggest the most critical element of whatever that structure is, if it includes not-for-profits, if it includes others, there's been a bunch of suggestions. Miguel Santana has some suggestions, United Way has some suggestions, you have some suggestions and the like. The key is politicians have to be held accountable for it. And they've got to be metrics, and here's what you promised to do, and here's what you said you were going to do, or you lose your job. When the county came to me and asked for money, I said to them, okay, when I go to Blockbuster and buy a camera, and the camera's broken, I return it, I get my money back. You want $2 billion. If we give you the $2 billion, will you give it back to us if you don't solve the problem, if you don't fix it? Will you agree to resign your office? They weren't very happy when I said that. But those are the kinds of questions the public are asking us, and we have the ethical obligation to ask of everybody else. And I'll ask those tough questions, but I cannot. The most important thing is accountability. What those substructures look like in terms of relationship with I hear about from friends, I don't know what's accurate, you hear scuttlebutt all over the place, but like the county's not talking to the city and this one's not talking to this one. There's a point that Henry made of everybody. You've got to create that structure. And the tension, as everybody wants to point, oh, it's the state, oh, it's the this. Hey, you're on the payroll, you're getting government money, figure it out, fix it, or get the heck out of the way. Simple as that. But so it's all about accountability. It's all about taking on that responsibility as the elected, because right now, the different agencies and bureaucracies can point fingers to each other, and that's why we're in this mess. The public voted for bonds, the public voted for taxes, and they were willing to say this is an important problem, let's fix it, and we spent the money, and they don't feel that we've done it. Next case.
So I think that what we need to be looking at is, again, how are we going to get this done? We need to bring a diverse coalition of people who reflect the diversity of the district and the county, but also the understanding of the issue. We need to have people with lived experience at the table. We need to have people who are helping to solve these problems currently at the table. And yes, policymakers, to make sure that this isn't just sort of a flash in the pan, but we're actually thinking about the systems and structures that it has to be built into. Right now, LASA was created primarily out of a court decision, not by policymakers, not by legislative action. So when you think about that, that's not how we're going to solve these kinds of complicated problems, especially because the people who are tasked with solving them are not empowered to do that work. We need to have the people who are actually doing that work at the table and part of the decision-making process. I think we need to scale back LASA's role and empower a new entity that is directly accountable. What people see is that they have taxed themselves, they've elected all the people who promised to make these changes, but they haven't seen the results. The money may have been allocated in Triple H, or it may exist through Measure H, but where has it been spent, and to what end has it improved their quality of life? And if we're relying on that money in the future, I don't know that the voters are going to give it to us if we can't show them how it's been spent to their benefit. So I think what we need to do is have direct accountability, status reports at every single Board of Supervisors meeting to understand where that money has been invested and how we're measuring success. That's why we need to work with neighborhoods and neighborhood leaders to bring culturally competent solutions and solutions that make sense, instead of treating every neighborhood, as we've heard from some policies and proposals, as if they're all the same and one size fits all. We can't do that. We need to actually work with the people who are on the ground, who are receiving that service, and they can help us also understand what challenges they've experienced so we can eliminate those barriers to access.
I would say that giving up some of our power will make us more powerful. So in terms of the governance and structural reform, if City Hall, and not just LA City Hall, but if all our contract cities too, were willing on a specific slice of this affordable or permanent supportive or certainly transitional housing to relent on some of their sort of micro authority for exactly where that ought to be, that project ought to be, or what the financing ought to be, and to be willing to give that to some other central structure. And I'm really interested in what Weingart's put out there on the center. But I'm not ready to go there yet. I think we ought to give ourselves a shot clock and go to the voters of LA and basically say, I've been trying to think what the timeline is yet. I don't have it yet. Maybe it's 2 years. Certainly has to be well before the Olympics. But to give the current structure 2 years to work, and to say if that goes away, if we don't get to where we need to be, that the entire thing changes, and that the lines between city and county get blown up, and that a lot of that micro-control goes away. And that's a radical shift. So I don't want to go there right out the gates. But I think we need to explore that, and I think we need that hanging over our heads to really light the fire. The other thing I would just say is, so that's a land use decision-making piece of it. On the financing side, we need a similar superstructure. I want to see a trust fund put together that's not just citywide, which is right now going to be on our ballot coming up here, right? There's a city initiative. The contract cities need to be engaged too. All of LA needs to be engaged too. Basically, everyone within RENA needs to be within a trust fund so that Calabasas or Malibu or even out into West Hollywood, we can be co-financing projects across LA County and not really go kingdom by kingdom. So I think, less lines, more unity.
Councilmember Horvath, this time we're going to start with you. Of course, inextricably linked with the homelessness issue is the issue of housing. And the tension point there often comes down to you've got tenants, especially in the midst of this pandemic, struggling to pay rent. But every time eviction relief is extended, you've got landlords saying, how am I supposed to be paying my mortgage? What's your thoughts on how to best approach this particular situation?
Well, as a renter, I have particular thoughts about that. And in my own community, I've asked that we take a proactive approach to finding what those solutions are. The eviction moratoria that came from the state or from the county, we also had some locally, but we've rescinded ours now that the county has extended theirs. But we haven't heard with them when they've announced what the moratoria are, what the plans are to repeal them and support people so we don't have an even greater homelessness crisis as a result. In my own community, even before COVID-19, we instituted a grant program where renters were able to access small grants to keep them in the housing that they can currently afford, but for maybe one missed paycheck, which would have caused them to slip into homelessness. We need to have programs that help keep people in the housing that they can afford, but for these what would otherwise be disastrous emergencies, and help them take care of their families and keep them in place. We need to make sure that we are working with property owners to understand what it is they need to be made whole and work with them. But it sounds like there's a lot of money that has been provided at the state, but I've heard horror stories of people trying to access that money that because they submitted a Word document and not a PDF, they weren't able to get a response. I mean, that's ridiculous. We need to make sure that we're helping people get the resources that are available and make sure that those resources are being invested to help people stay in housing. It's, once again, it's great if we come up with these solutions and we pass policies, but if people can't access them, it doesn't make a difference. And I see that firsthand. And I think that especially renters right now are deeply concerned about who's going to step up and fight for them and allow them to stay in their housing while they're working 3 and 4 jobs. It just it doesn't make sense what's moving forward because there's no end in sight.
Senator Stern.
Yeah. I've been through that eviction process that you referred to at a personal level, and for somebody who's 92 years old, working class plumber in LA. This happens to be my father-in-law, living on a rent-controlled apartment right off 3rd Street, and wasn't evicted, but was constructively evicted, and maybe wouldn't win in court, but the urgency on behalf of the landlord there to push out all those tenants so they can flip it and go to something different, completely disrupted his life. And that's that disruption of losing your home, whether you're a senior or whether you're a single mother or whether you're just a working family, is so disruptive to your life. That's what starts that cycle of homelessness. And I honestly think my father-in-law would be homeless if it hadn't, didn't have like a state senator, son-in-law, and family who brought him in. We literally had to change from living in a 1-bedroom apartment right near my district office out in Calabasas. Like, you think no one has an apartment in Calabasas, all mansions. Turns out there's a few. We now have to we had to rent a 4-bedroom house, and like, I don't know how I'm gonna make ends meet, actually. I'm trying to figure out loans and things like that, but to do caretaking at home. And so families figure it out, but when you don't have a family, and you know that backstop, who's there? And so the government's supposed to be there. We can't finance all this on the backs of our landlords too. And a lot of small landlords who put everything they had into building the fourplex or making their life in LA based on that one apartment complex, I don't want to see mass bankruptcies. The state financing system on that is broken. The county system has not been effective. It's completely oversubscribed. Very interested in using maybe the tax code. We're not a grant style process where you have to go online and fill out these forms, but direct tax in lieu payments or other structures that's going to get money straight into their hands and just be through pathways they already know how to use, as opposed to standing up new websites and new programs. So I think getting smarter about the money pass through and then having protection so people don't get turned upside down in LA.
Bob Hertzberg.
Divide the eviction piece from the housing piece. On the eviction piece, I spent a huge amount of time negotiating the legislation that accessed the $5.4 billion from the federal government. What we did was we made a mistake in that first legislation in 2 respects. First, because we only afforded 80% to the landlord, we had to put all these requirements on it because it wasn't 100%. Secondly, as was suggested, it was a 36-page application. How did I find out? I applied for one. How did I find out? I went to the gas station, had a number, and I called up the number, and I said, hey, they said, go online. I said, well, I'm a senior citizen, and I don't have a phone. I don't have a computer. Well, you have to come to this office 20 miles away. I mean, God's in the details. It's not the devil, it's God. It's about how we do stuff. The thing about the county versus the state is that's where the details matter, where you got to drill in and know the stuff. So then we revisited this, we rewrote new legislation, we offered 100% pay to landlords, and which means that the state could pay directly. I have met with a number of folks at the courthouse who actually fill out the forms and figured out how we could do the judicial forms. So you could just check a box, landlord gets the money directly from the state, figuring out the details of making it work to make sure the landlord gets paid and to make sure that the system works well for people that are in trouble because of the pandemic. God's in the details. Second, on housing. I have spent the last year and a half, literally, I've got another meeting on Friday morning with lawyers from Orrick Harrington, with the former director of finance, with the former chief economist, putting together a program on housing, home ownership. The idea, when you rent, the only thing you get after 20 years is a bigger rent bill. If you own a house, you have equity. Equity deals with the underlying architecture of the rich-poor divide, which is tearing us apart on all of these issues. I don't want to build another house. I want to build another apartment. I want all home ownership. And this plan's like the GI Bill, where we're going to basically give you a second trust deed up to $150,000 to be able to afford to buy a house, because people don't have the money for the down payment. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I think it's really important in the architecture of understanding the issue, both of people losing their homes and also developing a future that's intelligent.
We're going to pivot and move to another huge, important topic, and that topic is sustainability. And this time, Senator Stern, the answers will begin with you. The current representative of this district, Sheila Kuehl, has aimed to make LA County fossil fuel free within the next 3 decades. Can you each tell us a little bit about your sustainability priorities, what you envision as a practical timeline, and the steps you would take to get us there?
Okay, that's a lot.
It is.
Let me take crack.
2 minutes.
Let me take crack. We need to solve the climate crisis not by outsourcing solutions, but by recognizing how we're built and build them here. I don't think it's about shutting every oil refinery in LA down. I think it's about converting those oil refineries to actually make fuel to run our diesel fleet or our jet fleet, like we're doing in Paramount right now. I don't think it's about just closing facilities like Aliso Canyon, which is in the valley, and I've been leading the fight to get that thing shuttered and closed. But I'm also very practical about how the energy system works, and that we use that facility, and we use Playa, and we use this gas system, and that the power plants are there when we need them. Well, couldn't we run some of those facilities on green hydrogen,
That's right,
powered with recycled water? Couldn't we shutter that Valley Generating Station that's been blowing pollution into Pacoima and actually change our ways? I don't think it's going to be solved with magical thinking. I think there's going to be some really hard choices on infrastructure. You're not going to just ban the internal combustion engine tomorrow. You have to actually finance electric vehicles to work for the middle class and make that accessible. The average family, I think, making $80,000 or less is spending half their income on their car and their fuel. So the family budget in LA is being sucked at by the fossil fuel economy, right? Especially with super commuters who are spending 3 hours on the road and literally, like, you got to choose between medicine and food and fixing or fueling your car. Like, that's an unethical choice. We can solve that. So I think that we're going to have to chip away at this thing, and we're going to have to build these solutions here at home. Like, we're going to have to build renewable energy and storage. I think over 4.5 gigawatts is the current number. I think we need more. Let's do that here. Right, so let's get comfortable building resilience and the solutions to this climate crisis here in LA. Water recycling, actual resilience to wildfires. We can get into some of the more details, but it's not going to be solved outside LA.
Senator Hertzberg.
You know, the word political will is used often. I remember I used to always read this in Tom Friedman's book. It drove me crazy because they always talk about political will. I believe in just getting it done. So I was Speaker of the Assembly during the energy crisis, and it was staggeringly difficult. But one of the big lessons from that energy crisis is that how the utility companies basically had written the laws in a way that it became impossible to do anything in renewable space. So what did I do? I didn't sit around and talk about it. I opened the first solar factory in South Los Angeles on Martin Luther King Boulevard. I took it public in Europe. I opened another company in Europe that I made solar from wind, so that the energy footprint was small and we could change up the game. I traveled to Africa and won the World Bank Award in Rwanda and China and all over the planet, learning tremendously about this issue, working with communities on small things like stoves and cell phone chargers and things that were central to them so kids could learn at night. And I came back to the legislature in large part in 2014, among a few other reasons, but to deal with this, because I got frustrated with all the political noise about numbers and options. Like, let's get it done. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can be done. On sustainability, this water issue, we just saw on the front page of the LA Times. I introduced a bill that said you can't put water in the ocean. Why? Because we're putting 3 million gallons of water a day in the ocean. Why? Because it's cleaned up to federal standards. Why can't we take and plumb it back and recharge the groundwater? Why do we have to draw water off the Colorado River or from Northern California or the environment? Why can't we think bigger in that regard? It produces jobs and the like. And I want to agree with Senator Stern also in terms of green hydrogen. Hydrogen made from water, from wind, and from the sun. Right? Smart stuff that doesn't mean that we have to throw people out of work. And the last thing, I met with Marty Adams the other day, who's the head of DWP, and we were talking about this whole electrification. These transformers are 4,000 volts. You need 24,000 volts. A friend of mine's over in Africa now looking at wires to figure out how we can handle this. You've got to look at all fronts. We have an emergency. We have to find all ways possible to make it happen.
So LA County recently passed what is now an award-winning sustainability plan, and it was created with community input. Community stakeholders participated in a months-long process to directly inform what is going on in neighborhoods throughout the county, and created a plan that actually got agreement brought people together, didn't divide them, and had personal direct investment in how to get it done. We need to fully fund that sustainability plan. It has outlined short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions. We need to make sure that we stay on track to meeting those solutions and fully funding them as they come up in our budget cycles. Some of the short-term solutions, we need to make sure that the promises of measures R and M are realized. And I say that it sounds like a long-term solution, but it is a short-term one because there are alternative modes of transportation we can be investing in right now. And we also need to lay the groundwork for that transportation infrastructure to be built right now, especially if we want it in time for the Olympics. And that transportation infrastructure will not only be reflected on a global scale for that event, but it will be what people use on a daily basis to get to their jobs, to get to places of healthcare. We saw that during this health crisis, and I'm excited to see the Crenshaw Northern Extension connect from the South Bay up to the Valley, but also to Cedars-Sinai, where people have relied on quality care from all over the county. We need to make sure that these resources aren't inaccessible, and that will help take cars off the road. And that's one of our biggest contributors to carbon emissions. I also have led on the county's Clean Power Alliance, the CCAs, which the state have put a little pressure on trying to let us breathe and do our work. But our CCA is now the largest in the country. It is focused on clean energy solutions. We have opted in my community as a 100% renewable energy community, as many other cities have, getting cities on a track and a timeline that's much faster than what has happened at the state. So there are solutions that already exist. We just need to fund them and make sure they're realized.
Climate change is, of course, a problem that vexes us all throughout the globe. However, we know it does not impact all communities equally. There are grave environmental injustices throughout our region. Beginning with you, Senator Hertzberg, can you talk a little bit about your plans to both invest in and protect the communities that are especially vulnerable to climate change?
Yeah, I stood up on the Senate floor and took some heat from some folks that don't agree with me on a bill because I said we're not just talking about climate change, but climate changed. I told the story of Cindy Montañez, who said she has a friend who has a son who goes to school and brings a backpack because the temperature on the ground from the asphalt is so hot, 131 degrees. He sits on the backpack. It's horrible. So I work like crazy behind the scenes, which is most of what my work is. I don't have a lot of press conferences. I don't do a lot of fancy bills. I help a lot of other members get stuff done. That's my mode of choice. You know, it is a challenge sometimes because I'm not there at the rallies, but I'm there getting the bill done. And so I worked to get the couple $100 million in the budget that wasn't happening on the Senate side for Luz Rivas's extreme heat measures. I'm working now in the same method with extreme heat. What does that mean? That affects communities, street people, putting in trees, dealing with issues that impact the community because climate change is here and it impacts people's lives. So I think that we need to do, and which is what I've been focusing on, instead of talking about 2045 and saying that's our policy. I'm sorry. Let's talk about the here and now. Let's talk about what's going to happen in the next 24 months, 36 months, 48 months. Pacoima Beautiful that I did with Wendy in terms of getting that $23 million to help impact the community, right? Those kinds of things that were really impactful on the transformative communities. I have another bill in dealing with that exact same thing on transformative communities to make sure that we actually get more money out to these communities through these various programs that we have quicker, like what we did in Pacoima. I think it's a really big issue, and I think as we address climate change, I'm part of, with Henry, the Senate working group from the pro tem. There's a dozen of us putting together a big plan, and part of that plan includes not just issues going forward on clean energy and all that stuff, but also dealing with the real impact on people, because that's very important on the equity side.
Your question is about climate change.
And particularly the inequities around it and what you would do to invest and protect underserved communities that might be getting more impacted than others by this.
So through Clean Power Alliance, we've actually provided a seat at the table for communities throughout Los Angeles County and Ventura County too, to be at the table and directly accountable for the solutions that we're providing. So communities, we have diverse communities from Carson and from to Malibu, we have, and every community in between is at the table. And so making sure that those communities actually have a voice in the solutions is important. But we also need to make sure that we are mindful of the impacts that we're creating when we are talking about creating these kinds of facilities, making sure that they are located in community and they're not causing problems for communities like Pacoima, like Sylmar, where there have been health issues that have been measurable in families. They've been able to see asthma, or whether it's in Southeast LA, the impacts, the environmental impacts that have turned into health problems for families, we've seen it. So we need to make sure that we are mindful not only of what solutions we're bringing forward, but how they disproportionately impact different communities.
I've been through a lot of these climate disasters myself, and there's a reason FEMA rated Los Angeles the riskiest county in the country when they were assessing disaster risk, and specifically climate risk. It's because we have a unique mix of vulnerability in this county of people who either don't have access to transportation, live in high exposure areas to, say, wildfire or floods. People don't want to talk about floods, but if you live in Whittier Narrows, you're thinking about floods. And when these bad things happen, the people who can least afford it do get left behind. And you might think of wildfire as, say, a rural issue, or that only happens in Santa Clarita or in Malibu or in Calabasas, but smoke doesn't behave that way. And 3 days of exposure to a serious wildfire on a child's lungs means 30 years of respiratory illness and a permanent changeover in the genetics of that child's respiratory function. So wildfires are an equity issue. Neighborhood oil and gas drilling is an equity issue, and we shouldn't keep drilling near people's homes or extracting gas in their backyards when they're dealing with that benzene. And then when we talk about cars, we talked a little bit about housing, but a car is the biggest asset most families own or barely own or financing or underwater on. And that car is such a drain, not just on the budget, but it's literally poisoning the community. I think 1% of California's vehicle fleet is causing 45% of our pollution on an air quality basis. Because you basically got a ghost fleet, and the cars live a very long time in LA. And so if we can go at that ghost fleet and turn over the 1 million most polluting cars in Los Angeles, which happen to be owned by people who are impacted by environmental justice, and find a way for them to scrap those cars, get them off the road and replace that with something electric, it's going to save their family money, and do that in the next 2 years, to me, that's justice.
We're going to discuss stormwater, and this question will begin with you, Councilmember Horvath. 100 billion gallons of polluted runoff flow out of LA storms drains annually, more than 30 billion exiting directly into the Santa Monica Bay. So can you talk about how you plan to bring the county into compliance with the permits known as MS4 permits and improve overall the quality of stormwater runoff here in Los Angeles County?
Yes, well, I know that there are plans to do that, but again, it's about implementation. I have served as a leader on the LA County sanitation districts, where we have heard from all communities in Los Angeles County how each city and each region is dealing with what is expected from this plan, and that once again, it was a plan that was made for them without their input. We need to make sure that that we are getting neighborhood input, that we are getting local voices at the table, and that we are delivering solutions that bring people together, not divide them. Right now in our district, we have very different perspectives from Santa Monica to the Valley on what runoff looks like and what impact it has on different communities. All of those voices need to be at the table in order to implement the policies that are proposed for LA County.
So you got a former water chair and the current chair of water here. So there's a lot of water thinking that's gone on this stage, and I think some creative thinking. But this is also a matter of money, and LA's not getting its fair share in Sacramento right now when it comes to water recycling and stormwater. Even last year, everyone was talking about a Northern California drought. We live in a permanent drought in LA. There's no cycles anymore. It's just a great drying of the West. So the fact that we had to starve over $200 million when you're looking at the Carson project and Hyperion's retrofit in over a $12 billion range, that's what the head of EPA himself said, we're spitting in the wind. It's really, we're throwing peanuts at something that is going to take a complete overhaul. So I think we need to fully finance Hyperion and Carson. And then I think we need to rethink how the LA River works. And I think in the San Fernando Valley, you're looking at the heart of it, right at Lake Balboa, which is a huge opportunity to not just build Olympic infrastructure and think about, sort of concessions and revenue, but from a flood management and a stormwater capture perspective, if we actually changed Lake Balboa and made it a place that could capture that stormwater and acted more like a floodplain and less like a concrete channel, I think we could solve both disaster risk and do some of that stormwater capture at the same time. This has been a long history of litigation. There's been a lot of fights over the years. But ultimately, I think we're past that, and we're at the place where now everyone's just got to pay up. And look, I think the contract counties that have been either in South LA or in the north part where I live, they've been reluctant because they don't trust that county's actually going to be able to do something about it. But I think we're getting the leadership in place under Measure W, and we've got a conduit now. If we can supercharge that and get the state to pay attention to just us little 60% down here in Southern California, we'd make a dent.
Senator Hertzberg.
Yeah, the county voters on a 69.45% passed Measure W in 2018. That measure provides a 2.5 cent per square foot tax. There is plenty of money. The big fight on Measure W was two fronts. One, places like Glendora and other small cities were upset that they were going to get huge tax bills for their permits, and they were very scared about that, and it was very problematic, but it still got 69.45%. Well, I did not support Measure W, and the reason I didn't support Measure W is because I thought it was dumber than a box of rocks. Because what happens is you go out, it says you're going to tax everybody, you're going to clean up the water, just like we're doing now at Hyperion, 500,000 acre feet a year. We're going to put it in the ocean. Like, let's use that money to also recharge groundwater. It is cleaned up. Have Mother Earth finish it. Put a straw in the ground. Get sustainability. I thought that the idea was so limited because it only related to the issue of this huge tax, this huge amount of money, fabulously important issue. Yes, I get it for Heal the Bay. Yes, I get all those things. But the bottom line is it should have had a sustainability component so we could have captured that water. If we're going to be successful going forward, we have to capture every ounce of water and recycle it. And the way you do it is not build big lakes and whatever. You do it by recharging the groundwater. It's called conjunctive use. And then I have a whole map out. My office, it's called the William Mulholland Room because I'm a water guy. I wrote my dissertation back in 1976 on water, as the chairman says, and I was chair before Chairman Stern of that committee, and care deeply about this issue. But we have to think and marry the genius of good public policy is looking at it at every level at which it plays, rather than the small interest groups that try to push for it and try to get a big picture answer to that. So that's why I did what I did on Measure W, and that's what I think we should still be doing, and it passed a secondary bond to pay for the cost of capturing that water and recharging the groundwater. It would be really important for us in the region.
We don't have enough water. We do have, especially lately, plenty of sun. Solar farms are doing a great job of providing us with clean energy. Issue is there are a lot of complaints about permitting delays, excessive regulations, which is stalling new facilities from opening. Starting with you, Senator Stern, what would you do to streamline and expedite clean energy projects, especially solar, in the region?
I would build on some of the success actually that LABC had at a city level. They've been doing some very creative work with their commercial business partners and a lot of leaders here. What LADWP has done on the feed-in tariff, I think, was quite a success. That's smaller scale solar that I think we can keep building on. I think there's still a lot of roof space in LA that hasn't been utilized properly. So I still think, we don't only need to think large utility scale, but the fact is we're also going to have to figure out, like I said earlier, how to actually build some of that generation capacity in basin. And so that's going to be a lot about land use and transmission issues, which nobody likes to deal with that part of it. That's actually the most important place the county, I think, can directly align here. So we could talk about the CCA, and the Clean Power Alliance, I think, has been incredibly successful as a tool for bringing local governments to the table and getting them invested in clean energy future. But a lot of that power's on paper, right? That power's not necessarily coming from in-basin. And they're not providing resilience, say, to PSPS events when the wind kicks up and they shut down our power. Where's that generation in basin? When Aliso's starting to wind down, where's that generation in basin? So the county can help, but from a land use perspective, looking at surplus property, looking at county building space, and really leverage the public sector market, I think, to scale something that is such a no-brainer, right? I mean, it's the sunniest place there is, and unfortunately, it's only going to get hotter and sunnier. And so with all that extreme heat, we've got to leverage that. But we have the real estate to do it. The land is here. We're just going to have to get very intentional and bring people together around the land use side and frankly around the regulatory structure and find some kind of brokered peace over this utility model. I don't think we can break Edison and expect to get there either. So we're going to have to do this together. I think I've had the experience doing that to get it done.
Senator Hertzberg.
Hi. Yeah, I want to take the solar issue and divide it into 3 spots. First, I want to talk about commercial, because that was my business I was in back in 1984 and 2003 and 4 or whatever in South LA, which is what I did. The laws relating to commercial are screwed up. I mean, I would go out, I tried to sell a roof, 2 million square foot solar roof to Anheuser-Busch 30, 20 years ago, and because they got certain benefits, they couldn't get the benefit of the solar benefits. The way that we know the chair of DWP, general manager of DWP knows what those rules are, Mr. Nahai, very well. It was really, there were disincentives in the system as to how it worked. It was quite challenging because we were building on these flat panelized roof decks for my company. Our solar was £1 per square foot. The average solar is 10 pounds per square foot with the big glass, and those roofs wouldn't hold it. So part of it's using technology in an intelligent way to be able to actually penetrate those markets. On the residential side of things, the arguments, there's a big argument as to whether or not you should be using it. I'm gigantic for the residential stuff, and on utility stuff. Senator Stern mentioned this, and he's right. I mean, what's happening is you go out and have your big utility grade facility out in the desert, and then if you have extra power because it's not being used a certain time of day, you put it in batteries. That's not very smart. You give it away or sell it or whatever. You can make green hydrogen. You can take water and sun, use electrolyzer, and make hydrogen, which is storage. And you create really good jobs for people who are losing jobs in the fossil fuel industry. There's really creative ways to deal in the solar space that I'm excited about, and technologically, there's so many new wonderful things that are happening that I've experienced, and I really keep up on this stuff because I've been working on this space personally for 30 years. The last thing I'll share is Senator Wiener had a bill which was really smart that the other day, which we passed, we both voted on it, which basically created an app. So you can apply online and not have to go through all the paperwork. And it's super simple, super easy. Again, on the residential side, another simple, intelligent example. I stood up on the floor and supported it.
Lindsay Horvath.
Well, part of the ways that we can make sure solar expands is incentivizing it. And right now the state is taking away the incentives that people have and are able to access in order to bring solar power into their community and bring that solar infrastructure. So we need to keep those incentives. We need to make sure that people can afford, to your previous question about disadvantaged communities, some of the solutions that we provide are not economically accessible. So making sure that we are helping communities have the solutions that they need. Solar is one of them. Those incentives are very important. And with Clean Power Alliance, we actually did just cut a ribbon on a brand new facility that's generation plus storage for LA County. But what we don't see and what we see happening to CCAs throughout the state, because of what's happened with some CCAs in Northern California, is a lot more pressure being put on CCAs to come up with our backup plan, so to speak. But that same backup plan isn't being asked of our IOUs, and they didn't provide power in some of these times of emergency as well. So they are supposed to be our backups, but they also are not held to the same standards that the CCAs are in our state. What we need to make sure we're doing is investing in the infrastructure that works, bringing people together to make those solutions, and making them practical solutions that people can actually access.
We're going to pivot and take a look at the economy. A recent Yelp economic report revealed that there have been 15,000 business closures in LA County. Half of those are expected to be permanent. Starting with you, Senator Hertzberg, what does an equitable economic recovery from this pandemic look like to you, and how would you support small, diverse businesses in this region and give them access to new market, both public and private?
Yeah, the challenge with respect to what's happened, you know, and look, I'm an honest person. I contributed to it because I ordered a lot of stuff on Amazon during the pandemic because I had a little baby at home and I was scared to go out, you know, because of the pandemic. And it hurt small businesses, there's no question about it. But what we've done at the state level, and what we should do more of, because we have plenty of money to do it, is to provide these grants available. With small grants, my barber got $5,000 to help him as he was closed up, to make sure those are there. It's critically important in terms of money, because at the end of the day, it's about money. It's critically important because you're ultimately in the name of business. Two, with respect to the employment side of business, right? The equitable side of what's happening here is that there are people who have service businesses that could go home and work in their businesses, but then there's a whole host of people that had to be exposed to the pandemic, whatever the future problem is. And so I think that this really has shined a light on this inequities in our system that concerns me. So in terms of wages, in terms of time off, in terms of mental health issues, particularly in the health space, there's a real necessity to rethink the equity portion of that. And the other piece of equity, to me, at the end of the day, is when you look at people when they rent, right? I mean, equity is how you get treated on a day-to-day basis, what you're exposed to, what your opportunities are, but also the opportunity to build wealth. And that's why I'm so big on home ownership, because all you get, like 50 or 60% of the increase in wages from minimum wage have gone either to your higher rent or to higher utility bills. Like, okay, how smart is that? You've got to create an architecture, economic architecture, to be able to change up the game. And, you know, I served, am I done? Okay, thank you.
30 seconds.
30 seconds? Okay. You know, I shared the economic, when I left the speakership, I did not just walk away. I went into the renewable energy business. I chaired the LA County Economic Development Corporation in 2004, and I came back when I came back from overseas and my whirlwind stuff on renewables that I traveled all around the world on. I came and chaired the LA Economic Development Corporation again, working with businesses, working particularly with small businesses, doing the homework, doing the day-to-day stuff to make sure that we had the programs, that we had the support necessary to help businesses. But the only thing I would share, that the essence of your question that's critical, is the equity component. And I do think that requires a very different rethink about the new world order in which we find ourselves post-pandemic.
Lindsay Horvath, your post-pandemic plans for small businesses.
Well, we need to make sure that we're supporting businesses now. I'm concerned there actually won't be a post-pandemic. It's just something we're going to have to live with. And that's why we've been helping our businesses now. We worked with our Chamber of Commerce to provide free mediation services for tenants to work with their property owners or landlords on rent issues, so they didn't have to pay for that service. It's something that we provided. We provided small business loans or grants to small businesses in our community to help them bridge some of those expenses that help keep them up and running. We work to cut back some of the bureaucracy and the red tape for people to apply to expand their businesses onto the sidewalks, or to be able to provide beverages on the go. I know that was very popular, but also making sure that businesses could expand. Some were not able to serve unless they were serving guests of a hotel, for example. example. And so we made sure that those practical solutions that actually made sense for each business, we met them where they were and understood what it was that they were looking for. But we also fought back when they weren't getting response from the county. And I think that was a big thing that I heard from businesses in my community. They just weren't getting responsives. And on top of that, there were lots of demands being placed on businesses without any understanding or input from those businesses on how they were going to accomplish it. I know at the local level, we heard things coming from the state and then from the county. And by 5, there was a 12 p.m. press conference followed by a 1:30 p.m. Order that was issued. And by 5 o'clock, we were supposed to understand how to implement it. That's not how we keep our businesses safe. It's not how we keep them up and running. And we can't continue to put that kind of pressure on our businesses. What we need to do is bring businesses into the fold and create an opportunity for businesses to be at the table when we're making those decisions in the first place.
I'd say we need to build on the systems we've built during this pandemic that started off very clunky. To both my colleagues' points, the first round of the $9 billion of both federal and state money that went out for small business grants didn't work. And the backlog's been huge, and we're just mining through it. I mean, in my district office alone, I think we got 5 people working in my office, and we did 1,000 cases, right? Like that, they're not even trained to do that. But what we realize is we need navigators, and we worked with the SBA to get some regional small business navigators, so you don't have to just wait for the county to pick up, but you actually have somebody on your case constantly. I don't want to close up shop as soon as we move from, say, pandemic to endemic, right? I think that we've got to use the architecture we've built, not just close up our tents, and actually keep that support going. It's a strange way to think about it because as the crisis wanes, I think our budget appetite's going to wane, but I don't think that $9 billion is going to do it. I actually think if we want restaurants to survive, I mean, I'm trying to negotiate a loan right now with the county. Little Italian restaurant's been in Agoura for like 15 years. Trying to get $200,000 to back pay for their rent that they basically have not been able to cover. And they're going to close up in about a month unless we do something about it. That restaurant relief fund, we just, I think we put another $100 million towards it, but like that can't end. There actually needs to be a permanent architecture around that support, and I think the personnel to do it. And I think county is doesn't see itself as the front lines of that always, right? You think of city doing that, or maybe SBA or some of the federal systems, but they've now stepped in and taken on this program. So I would say either we perform at the county level or we relent and we say we're not in charge anymore. Either the state's running this or the city's running it, but I don't have any ego or pride in how it's being administered. I just think it needs to be, how long do you sit on hold waiting for that navigator to pick up your call? Are you getting the case management you need? And then is someone there in the back end to actually pay for it?
In my mind, I'm coming up with the 2022 election year bingo card for what are the words we're going to hear over and over again in debates and events like this. And I kind of want to put a square that says U-Haul trucks, because I think we're going to hear a lot about all those U-Haul trucks that are taking people out of California. And LA has seen several major companies move their headquarters out of the county, out of the state. I believe our question begins with you, sure. Senator Stern. In your opinion, what do you think is causing this outward bound move, and how do you think we can make LA County more attractive to businesses to keep the U-Haul trucks out of the equation?
Between the U-Haul trucks and Elon, there's a lot of chatter, and I think I predict Mr. Musk will come back to California, and is already making plans to. His ego gets a little fragile sometimes, but he needs us more than we need him. We are the buyer's market, and I think that's true for the entire manufacturing base in Los Angeles, that there is a natural gravity to this system. But it's not going to just fix itself. Just because of our consumer demand won't solve it. There's a lot of dynamism in the economy right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the housing market. I don't think it's just an unfriendly business climate or somehow Los Angeles doesn't like its industries here. I think it's actually that housing, if you look at, it's I think $795,000 is the average median price of a home in LA. Like, how do you go make a new hire if you want to expand your headquarters for a new large business, or what they're doing down at Hackman in Culver City, or what they're doing out in Canoga Park at Warner Center? Like, how do you want to build your whatever it is, your insurance company or your health company or what, if everyone has to basically live in sub-poverty standards? So I think solving the housing crisis will solve that fragility and sort of volatility, if you will, in our current economic climate. But I don't also want to. I think we have a lot to be proud of here. I think we attract tens of billions of dollars of foreign investment every year, and I really think Olympics as our lodestar and looking at 2028 and really starting to turn some of these issues around by then. Momentum's on our side. I just that we're going to have to acknowledge what we don't do well and solve this housing crisis.
Senator Hertzberg.
This question really concerns me because, what really happens, it exacerbates the left-right problem, okay? The Democrats say nobody's leaving, everything's great. The Republicans, I hear story after story of business people, I'm leaving, screaming at me, friends calling, law firms getting hired to figure out how they can move out and change their stuff, because of the tax code and stuff. So I've been working now for probably a year with Joel Kotkin at Chapman and others, and he just finished a report that I just saw the draft a couple of days ago about the California Dream. Getting the baseline information. What's the truth, right? Who is leaving? Why are they leaving? What are their age group? What are their ethnicities? What are the motivations on those things, so we can avoid this finger pointing that so infuriates our Twitter politics of everybody just blowing up everybody. And it is schools, it is public safety, it is housing, it is retirement age people that are finding other places to go. It is tax, in the sense that Trump passed a law called SALT, the state and local tax law, that basically doesn't allow us to deduct our money. You can go to other states. I just talked to a friend of mine, a former congressman yesterday, who moved to Florida from California. Not fun stuff, but tax issues on the higher end issues. So, it really is the bread and butter kind of things in terms of what the future of California looks like. Do we have the tax revenue? I've been with Joe and Cosberg, we've done this now for 12 years, trying to figure out the tax code of what to do there, because the volatility. Right now we got plenty of money. These guys are lucky. They're living through times of government where there's plenty of dough. I've lived through times where we were begging for dough and making furloughs. Let me tell you, it's a completely different world. And again, structure of government. What do we do? On taxes, it goes like this and like this. We did a rainy day fund that we did with Arnold and then with John Perez, but that's just a Band-Aid. We got to work on those things so we get rid of that. But I think there's a whole host of factors, but that you're going to hear something. He'll be putting this out shortly. I got the preview on it. But it really is to avoid the finger pointing and get to what's really going on, right? That to me is the question. And then from there, build the public policy on schools, on housing. That's why I'm so big on this home ownership thing and the like, to get to the architecture to build the future of an economy that works and a society that's just.
Lindsay Horvath.
We need to actually meet people where they are on this. As a mayor during COVID, my community was recognized by the LABC as the most business-friendly community most business-friendly city in Los Angeles County.
I gave you the award.
And we did that because, that happened because we started and ended our week speaking with our business community leaders on what they needed and what progress we made that week. We have to measure that progress week by week and really meet people where they are. That's why I authored a policy to cut business license fees in half, to cut business taxes in half. We knew that would hit our city budget, but we also knew that it would keep people employed. It would keep businesses open. And so sometimes we have to make those sacrifices in the short term to ensure that the businesses that are providing those jobs and providing that livelihood so people can afford their housing, so people can afford that rent, that's what we need to do. And it doesn't mean that those cuts have to be made forever. I'm sure some people would like that. As a small business owner, I would like that too. But I witnessed firsthand the struggle of keeping people employed in my own business during this time. And gratefully, we were able to keep everybody employed by working together. I know that each small business is really trying to figure out how to protect their employees, and they're doing that by bringing employees into conversations that maybe they weren't a part of before. We need to do the same at the county by bringing our businesses into decision-making that they probably weren't a part of before, and help inform how we're setting those policies from a place of experience rather than just having things happen to businesses and hoping for the best that they're not going to leave. I rarely hear people going to businesses saying, what is it that you need? We talk a lot about how we serve individual people, and we need to do that. We need to take care of our people. But businesses are the places where people work and realize their dreams, and so we need to take care of our businesses too.
Something that definitely has earned a spot on my election year political bingo card is crime and safety. It's an issue we've already heard so much about, especially with several areas of crime on the increase in LA County. Starting with you, Senator Hertzberg, how do you plan to ensure the safety of residents in District 3?
Well, I'm not an anti-police person. I don't believe in defunding the police. I think that there's functions that have been given to the police that could be given to other social services that are important. But, I remember sitting on a call with one of my colleagues from the San Fernando Valley, and we were talking about defunding the police in the early days, and she says, we like the police in the San Fernando Valley. I'm going, yeah, I'm for that. So part of it's that attitude. Second, and making sure that we have the resources there in terms of, we've got a big problem at the Sheriff's Department. Forget who the current personnel are, but with overtime and a bunch of other issues that are critically important. So that's number one, that I would not just take people off the street and do that. I really believe in the whole idea of community policing that the city did way back when. We should be doing more of that. It's important. Again, we have 44 communities in this, I hate the word district, that's a Soviet term, in this area that represented by whoever's going to be the next supervisor. But so that's number one. Number two, just a couple of things on my history. I was chairman of Public Safety Committee decades ago, 25, 26 years ago, I can't remember. And I sat down and looked at every aspect of public safety from the 311 system to death penalties. I created the 311 system that everybody has here when I did that. We created a crime lab in downtown Los Angeles and East LA, the largest crime lab in the country. Why? Because it convicts people that are guilty, and it makes sure people that are innocent are not convicted, right? Thinking through every aspect of the system, I did this whole equity piece with respect to traffic tickets and making sure we had 6 million people who lost their licenses, and created a whole amnesty program to get people's licenses back because they had not shown up in court, to figure out how to make that work and make it work. So it's about a holistic view. I'm the kind of person who, when I sat down as chairman of the committee with the public safety code, and I read the penal code, and I read the whole thing cover to cover, and think strategically in how I do that. And so take the same approach to public safety. But cops are not my enemy, and I'm looking for their support and work hard.
Lindsay Horvath.
I don't think we should accept the premise that it is cops or investment in services. We have to do both, and I've done that in my community. What was proposed in LA County, I think, was allocating 10% of the budget to services and support to keep people safe. We've been doing that for decades, and it is actually what has helped keep people safe. And we've had plenty of funding to work with the Sheriff's Department, to have local law enforcement show up and take care of our communities, even during, and especially during, a time of crisis. During the unrest that we saw in 2020, we saw communities like Beverly Hills and Santa Monica turning to West Hollywood for support, and people in the region were asking, what is it that you're doing differently? Well, we worked with our local sheriff's department to be proactive, to allow people the space to protest and express their extreme frustration, which we all should share in. But we also did it in a way where we protected what exists in our community and what makes our community so special, both the ability to speak out and the ability to be in community. So I think what we need to do is listen to what people are looking for to help keep them safe. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge we are an all-white panel in a very diverse county. We need to make sure that we are giving voice to communities of color who might experience safety challenges different than predominantly white communities. We need to make sure that we are meeting people where they are and understanding what their experience of law enforcement, what their experience of social services, because we've also seen that Black and brown families have disproportionately been separated and had their children taken away and put into foster care, which also doesn't keep families safe. So we really need to take a look at safety as community safety and look at it from a holistic perspective.
Senator Stern.
People don't feel safe walking down the street in LA, and even in their homes or going to the CVS and get a prescription. The retail theft is real. And I think, a lot of businesses feel completely exposed. I think that it's a false choice to say that you've either got to cut public safety services or cut social services. Like, we can go from 3 to 300 mobile psychiatric units in LA and restore funding at the Sheriff's Department back to full service so that we're not left empty-handed when, say, street racers come out to the San Fernando Valley or run into, a family at a fast food restaurant on Platte. And people are dying on the streets right now, and there's a moral hazard problem, I think, that we've gotten. And regular people in LA, especially people in communities of color. I mean, I spend most of my time working in Canoga Park and Reseda and Winnetka. When I first moved out here from DC, when I lived in Canoga Park on Alabama, the Alabama boys were there. Like, that was a real thing. And gang life in Canoga Park was very real. But that started to change as the community started to improve, got a little health center built at the end of the street, started to improve the high school, sort of chipped away at it. But I don't hear any of my constituents right now telling me, like, get rid of LAPD, we're done with it. I would just say the other issue, though, has to do with the DA, how it's administered. At Men's Central Jail, we're basically treating it as a mental health institution. About 25% of the people there are incompetent to stand trial. Hundreds of people who basically are just getting recycled through the system, picked up off the street, and they have nowhere else to go but a hospital or jail. And that's incredibly expensive, and it's incredibly inhumane. So the DA was about to release, I think, 150 people who were incompetent to stand trial, mental health issues, and sent back to the streets at the end of this year. Because of the sentencing laws, they hadn't committed a serious crime, and so they had to go back. But instead of going back to the street, we forced county to step in with Department of Mental Health and get those people placed in subacute care for mental health issues. Because you can't just have a cold handoff. It can't be like, oh, you're incarcerated and then good luck, right? So that repeat offense that's happening, that's going to take proactive and not political posturing from the Sheriff's Department, from the DA, from the county itself. And all the posturing has got to stop because this is serious.
We are going to move to audience questions in a moment. A quick programming note, we're going to go now to a 1-minute time limit for the answers before we move to our audience questions. We're going to ask a closing question starting with you, Lindsay Horvath. Can you give us one specific example of an accomplishment that you are most proud of?
One thing that I am most proud of in my career of service, and this actually happened before I was ever an elected official, is partnering with the Sheriff's Department and community organizations to clear the backlog of untested rape kit evidence in LA County. I did this as a community activist. I did it with the partnership of my county supervisor. I did it with the partnership of community organizations and working together with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. This is exactly what my career has been, bringing people together, asking the tough questions, and finding practical solutions to our most pressing problems. We can do this without further dividing our community and our county. We can do this by bringing people together who seemingly have nothing in common these days, and we can do so by with honoring what makes people unique and special in community as well. There are a lot of different perspectives we're trying to meet in LA County, and I think that we need to make sure that we're meeting people where they are and bring them together as we're coming up with practical solutions for our most pressing problems.
Henry Stern.
I was trying to think of a good policy answer for you because I just keep thinking about my daughter.
Right.
I'm like, I'm just thinking.
Didn't say policy. You can go
I'm
with
just
this.
thinking of Ava, and I'm like, she's up in Sacramento right now. We road tripped up because I miss her every moment. And yeah, getting married to my wife and having this little girl and starting to build a life is the greatest thing I've ever done. And I already won, you know. I mean, politics is important, but this isn't a place to get personal validation or to feel like a big deal or to get famous. If you get famous in politics, usually it's for a bad reason. So I'm proud of being a dad and going through real life and knowing what caregiving is in a multi-generational household and knowing what people in LA go through. And, you know, that's a quiet pride that I think I share with a lot of people, but it's hard. It's hard to do.
Indeed it is. Bob Hertzberg.
Yeah, I want to join what Henry said in terms of family and kids. It's been extraordinary, and you know, it's just been unbelievable. But I do want to talk about a couple of policy things, because as you mentioned, the rape kits, the reason you are able to do that is because I got the crime lab to be able to get that backlog done in LA County, the first to be able to do that. Really a big thing to fundamentally the largest crime lab in the country. Again, it's in Cal State LA. Why did I do that? I wanted to build jobs in East LA. I wanted to create a larger economic dynamic about that, and that's why we put it there. I also want to talk about the Valley Performing Arts Center, because the Valley, again, is always chopped liver on so many things, and this was so important to the San Fernando Valley to put this extraordinary place there. And the AB 16 that I did, $50 million of that money came there. And the last thing I just want to share is the privacy law. I worked my heart out in the last couple of years, went on the ballot, and no one thought it was even possible to protect consumers on privacy. They gave us 1% if we were lucky on a chance to get it done. We passed the legislature. Senator Stern voted for it as well. And then it didn't work. We had to fix it, and we took it to the ballot. And everybody said that was impossible, and we did it.
All
and
right.
it's going to be great.
Audience questions. Don't put that mask up yet.
Okay.
Henry Stern, this is for you. What are your thoughts on the role of law enforcement in addressing homelessness?
There's a role. You know, I was driving home the other night on a dark canyon road and almost hit a man walking in the middle of the road and didn't know where he was. I pulled over and tried to coach him off the side of the road, because the week before that I saw somebody get hit and killed, literally helping out with CPR right in front of me, guy on his bicycle with all his belongings just strewn out across the highway, and it's just broke me. But when I almost hit that guy the other night, his name's Bob, no relation, I think. But
I think it was me.
But seriously, I mean, I went and picked up the phone and called the county, and I called the hotlines, and I called shelters, and I went on the Hop LA app. Nobody's there. They say, sorry, we're experiencing a backlog. We'll be back with you in 4 or 5 days. I can't wait 4 or 5 days, because literally the car's coming down the road and almost hit Bob 15 seconds after I was trying to get him off the road. So I called the sheriff's department, because they were it. That was it. And I waited there with Bob. The sheriff's department showed up, and we helped him get back to a shelter, this time in Santa Monica. I don't want to rely on the sheriff's department to be the front lines on homelessness, but when you talk about mental health crises, I think the psychiatric social workers and the public health nurses, they want to know that there's going to be someone there to back them up at their side, and I think there's a really smart partnership for the future of it all. Sorry for going over my 1 minute, but
Bob Hertzberg.
team effort.
Yeah, there clearly is a role. I mean, I'm a supporter of Senator Steinberg's effort on the right to housing. And basically what his message is that we're going to do everything possible to get you and take care of you, what Kerry Morrison's doing with respect to the whole person. But at some point, if someone stays on the street, you got to be able to take them off. And I agree with Senator Stern in the sense that these folks that are out there that are the social workers and other mental health providers need backup. And sometimes it's scary. It's very, very, very hard. And I also want to express some positive sentiment to law enforcement people, because you see them getting stuck doing all this stuff. That's not their job. That's not the highest best of their value and their use. It doesn't work well. So yes, there's an absolute role in my judgment, but with the borders around that I just expressed.
Councilmember.
I think in the short term, law enforcement has to be involved, because that's the way the system has been set up. If we invested in 211, if we invested in caseworkers who were going out on the streets to respond 24 hours a day. If we invested in the kind of care model that's proposed at LA County, then we would have a different experience. But that isn't the case right now. So I think that law enforcement has shown that they have stepped up in a vacuum when we're looking for services and support. We need to work with them, but they shouldn't be the frontline responders. That's not what they're provided in their training when they go to the academy, and it's not what they expect to do when they come onto the job. However, they do step up and take care of the issues that nobody else wants to take care of. And I think we have to culturally get out of the mindset that we're just going to call 911 for any problem that we don't want to deal with and know that somebody's going to show up and deal with it. We need to make sure that we have the services and support and actual solutions to address what we're experiencing, rather than just hoping somebody will show up and deal with a problem we don't want to address.
Another question on homelessness. Homelessness impacts some parts of District 3, such as Venice, more than others. What are your ideas to provide housing for this population when it isn't practical to house them all locally? Bob Hertzberg, this one starts with you.
We're going to have, there's no middle ground. These people are living on the street, or living on the beach and stuff. To the extent we can't find places, they got to have to go someplace else. I'd like to be able to afford to live on the beach and hang out on the beach, go surfing and doing the stuff. It's not my thing, but the idea is that there's certain communities, that's correct. That, it used to be downtown Los Angeles, it was a very different thing around the services and stuff, and now it's all over the county. And the bottom line, there's people talking about, I hear this all the time, in neighborhood councils, move folks to Lancaster. You don't do that, but you certainly can create facilities like the Hope of the Valley and other places where we give people the necessary services, the support, the whole person stuff, but you just got to relieve the burden on those communities. I don't think there's a middle ground to that.
I just recently did a ride along with Pastor Ron in Santa Monica, who works with West Coast Care, and they were actually part of the transformation that happened in Venice and Santa Monica Beach. And part of what they have done as a local community service provider is directly connect with people who have been on the beach and reconnect them with their families. They've gotten 1,000 people off in 1 year off the beach and back reunified with their families, bridging some of those gaps. We have to understand who these people are and treat them as people, and not just a problem to be dealt with. In terms of the housing, we need to not only build more housing that is affordable, but we also need to put people into housing that already exists. And some of the facilities that we have, like abandoned hospitals, for example, can quickly become temporary shelter to help transition people off the streets and then get them into permanent supportive housing as a shorter-term solution.
Venice and Skid Row were sort of the captivated the imagination, or the tragedy of homelessness in LA, but the numbers actually don't bear out that it's all happening there. It's the most visible stuff, but the hidden homelessness, people living in their cars,
right.
Kids going to UCLA, 1 out of every 10 kids there literally doesn't have a house. Victims of domestic violence who have to just crash on couches and find cracks to slip into. That's the invisible homelessness that to me is really driving it. I don't think we're going to solve this homelessness crisis, say, by putting up, taking over every single public park in LA and making that the spot, right? I think we've got to get a lot smarter about adaptive reuse and finding, I think home key can still work. I do believe, especially with wraparound services, that it can start to be part of the solution. I don't think that there's some magic between going Canoga Park or out to Malibu, that half hour. You should be able to find the best service possible. And especially when you're disconnected, you don't have access to transit or Section 8 or any of that work. That's not a good plan. So meet people where they are, but then let's start to centralize services and really customize it, and not just chase the most visible stuff that, put on a cowboy hat and try to solve.
The LABC was certainly dead on with its survey on homelessness, because this is the bulk of our questions from our audience today. Councilmember Horvath, this one will start with you. How will you ensure community support for homelessness solutions within your own district? Once projects are cited, community opposition can greatly slow down or even kill such projects.
So we need to bring people into the conversation early on before it's been decided. And in fact, I just recently heard former supervisors of Yaroslavsky talk about identifying a location that the county was looking to place housing, affordable housing, in Sherman Oaks, of all places. And he reached out to our now recently passed Richard Close, and he talked about how they work together, and he brought him into that process, and he said, I want to know what it is you want here, I want to know how you want to see this happen, but the one thing that isn't in question is whether this is going to happen. And I think that more and more neighborhoods are coming to that understanding that we have to put people somewhere. It might not be in building tall buildings in low-scale neighborhoods, but there are places in each neighborhood where people can be housed, and that's what we need to. That's why we need local leadership to be invested. And I think that when we've done that, when we bring people to the table, I've seen people say yes and create solutions.
Thank you. Henry Stern.
Some of the solutions are going to be those smaller sort of neighborhood-based solutions, and that could be, Habitat for Humanity coming in and building housing for families that actually want to own a home. But in crisis response mode, when you're talking about, people who may not make it through the week, there's got to be a speed and an urgency and a capacity there to deal with it. I think we're sweeping people around this town, and, little municipalities can say, like, we solved homelessness because look at our streets, but then you go one spot over in the jurisdiction, and it's not the case. So, it may feel like homelessness problem is solved in West Hollywood or in Beverly Hills, but that's just because it's not in those borders. It's just right on the edge. So if we take collective responsibility within the county, I think we can make a lot of progress. And yes, it's going to take that sort of interface with the community and a braveness and a selflessness from the county supervisor themselves to go take some political hits and not outsource that to the city council people. But there's also some arbitrary limits. Like, why is the only thing that Medi-Cal funds up to 6 IMD beds in a subacute mental health facility? Like, why can't it be a larger facility? Well, we don't want to warehouse everyone. We're not going back to Reagan, but why 6, right? Like, can we do more congregant care in safe settings and sort of break through some of these arbitrary paradigms?
Bob Hertzberg.
I spent a lot of time thinking this stuff through in the Valley. I've got a huge operation in my office of interns, and they're really quite brilliant from all ages, senior citizens to high school students and the like. And I had them survey every single piece of government land in the San Fernando Valley. I don't care if it's federal, state, city, county, forget it. Just tell me how many there are. It was over 3,000. I think it was 3,074. I then went and said, okay, let's look at each one of those, because the rules, for example, on surplus land are really dumb. It's like, well, I'm Department of Water and Power. I have a plan for this property in 2088, and so forget that. And so they said it doesn't constitute surplus, and it requires us to change the law of what constitutes surplus. Of that, I identified 198 parcels that I sent to the Department of General Services, head of the Department of Real Estate. And they only came up with 2 that they said they could do in the whole LA County. And I just gave them the ones from the Valley. So I just think that speed to market, getting this stuff done, there's stuff all over the place. If, again, going to the point of what that package would look like for us in LA, part of that would be changing the laws on surplus land, identify those, and then coordinate with the locals as to what they are. But we've got to get the instruments in place to make this happen.
2 more questions I want to get through. Let us all adhere to that 1-minute limit, and I think we could do it.
Better.
Henry Stern, starting with you.
Yes.
Inequality has increased. Poverty remains pervasive. Worker rights have improved, but more needs to be done. What will you do to address economic inequality in LA County?
Poverty in 60 seconds. Got it.
Not my rules.
No, I know. We're going to have to find a way to solve this housing crisis. It's not just going to be solved by wages alone. We're going to have to actually get more units in. So I think that'll start to solve it. I think that wraparound services in our schools and using schools as an epicenter and really looking at the community schools model. We did 100 million to-go meals in LAUSD. There's a reason. It's gigantic, yes, but people trust their schools. So why are there lines between schools as hubs for solving poverty issues and the county? Right? Why do we have that turf? Let's get out of the turf and actually tackle the problem.
Bob Hertzberg.
Have to build wealth. Poor people are poor because they got no money. Rich people are rich. How do they what? They live off their money. They go invest it in the bank. They get money every day. New money comes in because they earn money on stuff. We got to work hard. It's like the rules are pretty simple. That's why I'm so big on home ownership, where literally if somebody has a job and you buy them a house, you give them the down payment, they're on the track to build generational wealth. They're on track to fundamentally change their situation. Now, there's obviously the very poor people and the programs that are necessary to make that happen in terms of wages, in terms of working conditions, and all of those things that are really important. I'm a Democrat. I support labor in a big way. I don't like throwing them out of work. It's all the stuff I get beat up on and the environmental stuff. I'm the problem. You're not going to throw people out of a job to fix the environment. You're going to fix the environment and walk and chew gum at the same time. Same thing, but the bottom line is build wealth, build wealth, build wealth. You know what I mean? Universal basic assets, not a universal basic income.
Councilmember.
Wages are part of it, but we also have to reverse the impacts of policies that created that disparity in the first place, redlining chief among them. One of the things that the Crenshaw Northern Extension of Transportation does is connect communities that were intentionally divided years ago, separating people not just from housing, but also from jobs that afford them and their quality of life, that separating them from access to quality health care or arts and culture destinations. We need to think about how we're building infrastructure and providing services and support for people so that that the short term is helping them onto their feet, but the long term is giving them a runway so they're able to do this for themselves.
I did it. I did my 60.
You're right. Goodness gracious. I'm doing so much math in my head to make sure we can squeeze this in. Okay. You are right. Last but not least, there are 88 cities in the county, each with their own parochial priorities. How will you bring the cities together? Which I believe, Bob Hertzberg, begins with you.
And not only are there 88 cities, there's 526 subdivisions of government, all of which have lawyers and PR people and all the other stuff that, believe me, screw it up. You got 15 sanitation districts of which you served on one of the boards. It's crazy. As they say in Yiddish, for the Yiddish, you got to have a hole in your head on this stuff. And it's really as a result of the history of everything. But I worked on this. We created back during the secession movement, because I was from the San Fernando Valley during the secession movement, and created the Knox-Cortese-Hertzberg Act, which deals with the interrelationship between all of these various cities and tries to deal with what's called scope of influence and the like. But part of it has been suggested here. It's about coalition building. It's about listening. It's about not just acting your big cheeso from you're the mayor of LA or the mayor of Long Beach, but the mayor of West Hollywood's important too, in terms of the size of their city. Everybody is. And so it's really about convening the table, bringing them to the table in that regard, and not just throwing them under the bus is part of it. That's been my experience in history and working on this for so long and so many years, and working in the details of how this actually works. How do these governments interact? What are the spheres of influence? What are the fights? Calabasas had a big fight dealing with, whether or not something was going to be annexed or not, and what the rest of the folks felt. You see this stuff all over the place, and you got to pay attention to the detail and show respect.
As former president of California Contract Cities Association, all of the cities that contract for service with LA County, in addition to being mayor during COVID, I saw firsthand what cities really needed, what they were getting from the county, what they counted on them for, and what they weren't getting, especially during a time of crisis. That's why I'm endorsed by about, I think, like 100 of them now, 100 local elected leaders, because they trust me. We've built those relationships, and they know that I'm looking at this not just what resources might exist at the state or federal government to come into the county. I'm looking at how are we actually going to make what the county has accessible and practical and deliverable for our communities. So I would work with the coalition I've already built. This is a coalition I've built not just to win this election, but more importantly, to help me lead in this office. These districts are enormous. The idea that one person is tasked with, at a local level, with all of the duties of a supervisor is unique to Los Angeles, and for good reason. We need more people who are involved in this decision-making process, and we need more and different voices participating in that conversation.
The county is the service engine of LA. That's where the money moves through. Well, most people don't even know what LA County does.
Right.
They just know that when you call, it sort of doesn't work, or I want my test kit, and like, when does it come, or homelessness, and now everyone knows Dr. Ferrer, right? But if you're a contract city mayor, you definitely know who the county is. So I think taking that servant mindset to it and really trying to parse out, look, it's one thing to look at all the contract cities. There's specific cities in this district that have specific needs. And all the mayors are supporting me in this region, not like every region or part of some association. Like the actual mayors in this district, we're working together, and it's hard. It takes years to get a homelessness navigator in your backyard, or you want to get Lost Hills up so that you have some evacuation plan for how the sheriffs are going to help you through a wildfire. Those sort of small decisions every day are what matter. And I think if county wasn't seen as so aloof and someone you had to sort of go hat in hand to and sort of beg, but just to say, like, show up every day and how can I help you? I mean, that's what I've been trying to do at the state level. It's just this state job is not designed for that. The county job is the servant's job. And so I think with that mindset, the contract cities want to be part of the housing solution, but they don't know how to pay into RENA. They don't have a trust they can pitch into. There's no access. They're just sort of like trying to navigate it on their own. So it doesn't work. And I think just got to switch. No more kingdoms, just service.
All three of you have incredibly busy schedules doing what you currently do. I want to say how grateful we are for aligning your schedules, joining us here today, and sharing your visions with us. My sincere thanks to Mary and her stellar team at LA Business Council for coordinating this event, and of course, deepest gratitudes for everyone to make the time to come down this morning. Thank you so much. That concludes our event.